Videos like these are made possible by viewers like you, who support the channel through Patreon, channel memberships, and stream donations. And don't forget to check out the Bad Weapon Rehabilitation servers at www.badweaponrehab.tf. Check the links in the description for more information, and let's get into the video. I feel like Spy is really a love him or hate him kind of class, which is to say the people who play him love him, and the people who don't hate him for one reason or another. Though I'm sure even the people who play him have their days where they end up wishing they mained something else. Spy is such an interesting class to talk about, and a big part of that is because, objectively, Spy is the weakest class in the entire game. More than Pyro, more than Heavy, Spy is the weakest. See, some classes are so powerful in so many situations that not running them could be considered an active detriment to your team. But for Spy, I honestly struggle to think of game modes or scenarios where this is the case. Okay, I can think of one scenario, when the enemy team is really, really bad. But outside of that one situation, I'm gonna be honest here, and I might get some pushback for this, I seriously think if you want to play optimally, there's almost never any reason to play Spy, unless you just really enjoy playing him. So let's talk about why that is. Just what exactly is wrong with Spy. Spy is a specialist class who unfortunately shares his single target elimination specialty with another class who is far more adept at this task, the Sniper. See, Spy tends to have this problem, especially at base with his stock kit, where you get a kill and then you die. In the past, I've referred to this as Spy Syndrome. This issue is so pervasive to the point where many of his unlocks are meant to mitigate this as much as possible and add some degree of survivability after getting a backstab, because, frankly, he needs it. This is because once a Spy makes his presence known, he's usually incredibly trivial to take down, and unless he's getting a pick where no one else is around or he's just a god with his revolver aim, he's gonna get easily rolled over by just about any class he runs into. Only the medic rivals him in weakness during head-to-head combat, and honestly a lot of the time I'd pick the medic in that fight. Sniper tends not to have this problem unless his team fails to provide a solid front line, at which point he's forced to constantly retreat and not get anything done outside of a couple of picks. Sniper, despite being listed as a support class, is a lot like Engineer in that he first and foremost requires the offensive support of his teammates in order to give him the freedom to make plays. Spy, meanwhile, doesn't really care about this. He's less dependent on his teammates to provide him security, which is one of his few advantages over Sniper. Sniper, being a backline specialist, also means that he performs well when the front lines come to a halt and the game slows down, again much like Engineer. But when the game picks up the pace and the front lines are on the move, forwards or backwards, he struggles to maintain a solid hold. Sniper is stronger the more static the front line is, but once again, Spy doesn't really care about that. Spy's ability to get to the backline of the enemy team with ease thanks to his disguise and invisibility allows him to be much more freeform with his picks than Sniper, who's limited to targets within a certain sight line instead of, say, around a corner, which can be very helpful for certain targets like medics, who are smart enough to stay out of a sight line as they build Uber, but it also means that targets on the enemy backlines are going to be his priority. The problem with this is, the people on the backline aren't usually the ones winning the game. So yeah, you're probably going to be getting picks hanging out of the backline, but they're not going to be particularly important ones unless there's a really, really good sniper locking the area down, or maybe an engineer with a good teleporter setup, or the power class who's been rolling your team finally died and you get him coming back from spawn. But if you try to attack a group on the front line so you can actually accomplish something, then you'll be lucky to get 2 backstabs before everyone notices you and kills you in 2 shots. See, ideally, chain stabs are where Spy has a real advantage over Sniper. For Sniper to kill multiple high health targets, he needs to be effectively immobile and give himself tunnel vision for 3.5 seconds every time he needs to get a full charge, on top of hitting extremely precise headshots on what are very likely to be moving targets. Spy could just stab, 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 and boom, he's done. Unless all the classes you're fighting are 150 health or lower, Sniper struggles to accomplish the same thing, and the mechanical skill required to do so in roughly the same time frame as a Spy is immense. But that's ideally. Spy suffers from a lack of consistency based on several factors outside of your control, down to unpredictable enemies, random bad luck, and even your own teammates screwing you over and giving away your position. Hell, one of the better ways to play Spy consistently is unironically gunspy, Because even though Spy's guns are far from the strongest weapons in the game, at least then you can't blame anything but yourself. It's just you, your revolver, and the will to succeed.
Can I have a headshot fight? Headshot fight! Headshot fight! I win!
Combine all of this with the fact that Spy is generally putting himself in the riskiest possible position of any of the classes short of a ninja with no backup, and in truth, you may honestly be lucky to get one backstab in any given life, especially because it's so easy for people to tell you're a spy as a result of our next major issue. Disguises just aren't all that great. Unless you're very new to the game, it's incredibly easy to tell if someone is a spy if disguises are the only thing they're relying on. Not only are plenty of disguises straight up broken as a result of source spaghetti, but you lack the ability to perform several tasks that would make acting as a spy much more efficient and a much more reliable and legitimate strategy. For example, you can only fake a reload animation if you actually reload your revolver while you're disguised. This is incredibly niche. It effectively means you need to waste a shot before disguising and either turn off auto reload, which everyone should have on at all times otherwise, or else immediately switch away from your revolver so that you can then reload a grand total of 1 time, because your revolver reloads all of its ammo at once, meaning you'll get, at most, about a second of fakery for your troubles. How about if you just press the reload key while disguised, you fake a reload animation? That would make so many approaches so much more believable, especially for classes like Demoman who spend a lot of time reloading. Also, plenty of disguises simply aren't viable because the slow movement speed of the class means you aren't going to be able to catch up to anyone unless they hold still or back up into you. Disguises like Demo, Soldier, and Heavy would immediately be a lot more viable if you could regain your spy speed while disguised through the press of a button. Or hell, just do what you do with Scout with other fast classes and let him keep his base spy speed if it makes sense. Like, hey, if you disguise as a Pyro with the Power Jack, you get to move at regular spy speed, or an Highlander Demo Knight, a Soldier with the Escape Plan, a Heavy with the Gru, whatever. And speaking of Demo Knight, several bugs would also need to be fixed in regards to disguises. I can't tell you how many spies I've caught out immediately because the poor bastard disguises a Demo with no legs or a Pyro with no head. I know some patches were made to this not too long ago, like with the Engineer's Shotgun, which was a greatly appreciated change, but I still see these happen with a surprising degree of frequency. As it stands, the longer eyes are on you for, the worse disguises are, meaning you kind of need to make plays as fast as humanly possible before you get caught out for just existing. It can sometimes feel like the main purpose of disguises is to get past a sentry nest without being noticed, because a sentry is just about the only thing that's actually going to be fooled by a disguise consistently. Speaking of sentries, I've mentioned this before in other videos, but the Sapper really isn't a great tool for taking down engineer buildings unless you manage to kill the engineer yourself or he's died on his own. It's much better for disabling them for a short time so your team can follow up on it without worrying about getting shredded. There's a reason strange sappers also count assisted build destructions. This does make sense as Spy is listed as a support class, but this is just about the only way he's able to support his team. And even then, it feels less than opportune. Sapping a building is often chaotic and clumsy. You need to get in so close to the engineer and his buildings, and walking towards them as a teammate who isn't able to do anything that a normal teammate can do is a dead giveaway that you're a spy before you even reach it. Not to mention the fact that basic game sense means plenty of engineers will build nests in locations that are extremely suboptimal for a spy to make a play in. You'd think the engineer basically cornering self would make him more vulnerable, but in a lot of cases, it can make certain plays feel downright impossible. You basically need to either decloak right behind the engineer and hope he doesn't have ears, or else hope that the sentry is in an area you can drop down onto directly before he has time to shoot you. And even then, unless you're coordinating with your team, manage to gun down the engineer before he can unsap his sentry, or get lucky with a stab and sap, there's a good chance you won't accomplish anything and you'll just die. I see so many spies who just see themselves as sapper kamikazes who throw themselves at a sentry nest to try and take it down over and over again, and it's just sad to watch, really. I feel like Spy has a lot of potential as a class concept to support his team, with so many potential gadgets to sabotage his enemies with and provide information to his team, but he doesn't really utilize any of this. At the end of the day, His purpose is single target elimination with his knife, and that's something he's less than proficient in for several reasons. For starters, basing any class on melee hit registration in TF2 is a recipe for disaster. Every spy in the world has had countless moments where you completely miss a target you stabbed directly in the back and instantly killed someone you poked in the face. And listen, I know a lot of the spy mans watching this video are going to look at some of the more dubious stabs I make here and say, oh, well that wasn't a face stab. You actually performed a frame-perfect wimble-womble stab. Very well done, that's quite impressive. When the reality is I had no idea what the fuck I was doing for any of this. Anyway, the knife is incredibly inconsistent unless you absolutely master knowing exactly how to exploit it. And honestly, if you ask me, unless you find it just more fun than the other means of killing multiple people, which I don't really, the returns just aren't worth it. Besides the inconsistency, one of the biggest problems with the knife is that it simply isn't rewarding enough. And that sounds weird, right? Like it fucking insta-kills people, what more do you want? Well, what I mean is, all you're doing is killing one guy and then exposing yourself to the world for everyone to shoot at while you desperately try to run away and survive, without the ability to do so that mobile classes like Scout and Soldier have. Unless you're an expert at faking out people with your invisibility, or just using the Dead Ringer, if you get caught out, you're probably just gonna die. Most knife unlocks give you some sort of bonus on top of the kill that makes it much easier to escape or be more aggressive. And honestly, I feel like some of these effects given on kill for these unlocks could be applied to Spy at base. If Spy got a speed boost on backstabs all the time, yeah, that'd be great. It would mean he has the chance to not only get more chain stabs, but also run away much easier if that's what he needs to do. If Spy got some health on kill all the time, also great. It gives him much needed survivability once he gets caught out. If Spy got actually silent backstabs all the time, once again great. He can get some chain stabs rolling without people turning around the instant they hear the backstab noise. You'd almost need to combine all the positive attributes of the unlock knives into one super knife to give Spy a chance to keep up with the stronger combat classes consistently. There's a very good reason you see a lot of high-level pub-stomping Spy players using the kunai and Dead Ringer. It means they get to fucking play Spy more than they get to stare at the respawn screen. Now I've mentioned, maybe once or twice, that I find the kunai very frustrating to play against because it allows the Spy to snowball off of your bad teammates in order to just never die basically, but I understand why Spy players are so insistent on using it. I just think it's too good at the job it's been given, too rewarding against bad players, and too punishing towards good players. I think that the kunai is Spy's best and most overpowered weapon because it effectively changes his role from glass cannon to tank with no real downsides. But on the subject of overpowered weapons with no real downsides, there's the Diamondback, which is just too much for too little. At least catching out a kunai Spy before they snowball will kill them more quickly than if they had used any other item in the game. Sapping buildings and backstabbing people are Spy's only two jobs with no real degree of variation, and the Diamondback gives you free crits for each of these you accomplish. And with no range limit like the Ambassador, and no way to tell if the Spy has crits while he's disguised, this essentially removes any form of counterplay. It turns Spy into something between a scout and a sniper in terms of power, for nothing except a negligible damage penalty when he doesn't have crits, which is hardly impactful. Of course, a couple of poorly balanced unlocks are hardly the be-all end-all for dictating whether or not a class is balanced. Every class has at least one totally busted weapon, or at least a really stupidly designed one. Sometimes you get to be Sniper and have a whole bunch of stupidly designed weapons. Why does my main have the dumbest unlocks in the game? But it feels like Spy almost needs to abuse the most busted weapons in his kit, just to stand a chance of going any higher than 1-to-1 in his KDR against semi-competent players. There's so many issues plaguing Spy, from bugs all the way down to the core of his class, and it just kind of bums me out. A part of me would really like to see Spy become a lot more viable in general, not just in a competitive setting, which I guess is something else to talk about. Communication is a Spy's biggest weakness. Just pressing the V button on your keyboard and telling someone to turn around is enough to make sure that Spy never stands a chance. So in a competitive setting where people are always in communication with each other, even in Highlander where running Spy is required, Spy struggles hard. In fact, despite Highlander being the one game mode where Spy is actually consistently run competitively, I would argue it's actually one of the worst places for Spy to perform because everything is stacked against him. And one of the reasons for that is, it's the only game mode where spy is run consistently. Your team is required to have a spy at all times, meaning if there's a suboptimal situation for spy, there's nothing he can do about it. He can't switch off to a more effective class. He's forced to play against a pyro, and a pyro can so effortlessly shut down a spy that I genuinely think the interaction between the two classes is not even remotely balanced. It's one of the worst examples of a hard counter in the game, because it's so effortless for a pyro to ruin a spy that it's downright trivial to do so by complete accident. And more importantly, everyone on the enemy team is in constant communication with each other, and they always know there's going to be a spy there, meaning the spy loses out on his main utility, the element of surprise. Not to say that spy is worthless in Highlander or anything. Obviously he makes plays and gets picks in there, and there's plenty of situations where even experienced players will have no choice but to put all of their attention on a bigger threat besides the idea of a spy behind them. But I feel like the Highlander environment isn't necessarily the best place for spy to thrive in. Now, I think there's one last thing to bring up, and that's a what if scenario. What if nothing I just mentioned was a problem? What if spy was just amazing and consistent and just as good as everyone else, like the scout, the soldier, and the sniper? Well, if you ask me, he would be the single most annoying fucking class in the entire game. Spy's entire job depends on him killing you while you can't possibly be aware of him. This makes spy feel incredibly luck-based on both sides of the fight. Is your team fucking garbage? Well, a spy can just roll on through basically undeterred. Has your team used a mouse and keyboard before? Sorry, spy, better luck next time. There's a reason that most pub stomper spies will just re-queue over and over again until they get into a server where the majority is in the former camp. Even decent players adapt to a spy's presence quickly. If you've ever noticed how you do really well as spy at the start of a round, but then start to suck ass as time goes by, that's why. You're just being accounted for, and spy doesn't have counterplay to people knowing he exists outside of trick stabs. And while trick stabs can be very effective, they're not only unreliable, but extremely predictable to anyone with experience. Hell, sometimes a trick stab is so easily countered, it's completely invalidated by just standing still. But if there's no way to account for spy, then that's going to be incredibly frustrating because spy's purpose as a class is to punish you for playing the game and focusing on your target instead of whipping around every 5 seconds like you're trying to crack a kink in your neck you've had for 5 years. At its core, that is just irritating. Spy is a fundamentally annoying class to fight against, assuming you're not killing him immediately after catching him out, because you're not actually ever fighting a spy unless he gets into a gunfight with you. You're either dying to him or instantly killing him, pretty much the same as a sniper. And instantly killing the spy is obviously not very fun for him and feels very luck-based on his end, but the alternative also sucks because these interactions are so rarely going to feel fair on the part of the backstabbed as well. Were you just busy playing the game, focusing on something important, and got backstabbed? Well, that's annoying because you're just being punished for playing the fucking game. Did you catch out the spy but he got a bullshit face stab on you anyway? That's even worse because it feels like the spy just lucked his way out of an assured death when no other class can really do that. Hell, I think even people who hate close range quickscopes would have to concede that the sniper at least did that on purpose, even if they don't think it's balanced. And I can tell you from experience, that is not the case with a lot of face stabs that I've gotten. So balancing spy is incredibly challenging. You either run the risk of making his entire class redundant, or else intensely frustrating to fight. And spy, and sniper for that matter, are already frustrating enough to fight as it stands. Mix this with the sheer inconsistency with melee hit registration, backstab registration, client-side and server-side bullshit, and overall an extremely polarizing experience that makes determining what is and isn't good in the first place incredibly difficult, and I don't envy Valve in the slightest for not being sure what to do with this guy over the years. I've heard the argument before that when Valve was designing Sniper, they didn't account for people to clock in several thousand hours with him and become unstoppable masters of the class. Well, if that's the case, then by that same token, I can say with absolute certainty that when designing Spy, they didn't account for people to clock in several thousand hours fighting him and learning all of his tricks. Well, it's all fine and dandy to point out the flaws with Spy, and it's certainly easy, and I'm far from the first one to do so, but coming up with solutions to help fix this, that's a lot harder, and something I just don't have all the answers for. If you ask me, Spy needs a way to solidify his niche as a unique pick class so he doesn't feel overshadowed by Sniper. Spy is already such a unique class in terms of his playstyle, but in terms of the end result, it's so similar to Sniper and also kind of Demo Knight that it makes it feel almost not worth it because those options are either a lot easier or a lot safer. Spy doesn't need to become some kind of high damaging generalist like Scout or Soldier, but he doesn't need to stay in Sniper's shadow either. The tricky thing about finding a new area for Spy to specialize in is that not only does it require a near complete rework of the class, whether this be through changing him at base or even adding weapons that give him a new subclass or playstyle, but it's kind of like inventing something people have always needed, but didn't even realize it. Having all these cool gadgets, the theme of subterfuge, there's so much potential, I just want to see it realized. Over on my Rebalance server, we've made a few base changes to Spy, like giving his revolvers more consistent spread so he's able to defend himself better, buffing his cloak and decloak times to make picks more snappy and escapes more viable, adding a radar function to his Sapper to give away enemy positions, and greatly improving disguise functionality. Some of the changes made are suggestions I made in this very video, like fake reloading and being able to activate your normal Spy walking speed at will. So if you're cool with a nerfed kunai, then maybe some of you Spymans out there might want to check it out. We also ended up implementing the changes to Sniper that I suggested in the video covering all of his problems, and those have proven very effective as well. I don't know if these are enough to fix everything wrong with Spy and Sniper, but it's a good start. Suspiciously Death Note shaped book appears. You're too late, L. I've already drawn myself as the Chad, and you as the Soy Jack. Please hold still. No, I'm not. That's what you get for being a snitch!